I remember when I saw the trailers for this before I even watched the first Blade Runner, and it didn't really look special. It came out in the same year as a Beauty and the Beast remake, and like 7 superhero films. What was there to tell general audiences that this movie was going to be worth their time compared to these other films? The film didn't have the right marketing material for the public. If you watch the trailer, you don't really get an idea for the plot, so this made people think it was just going to be a basic rehash of the original. With Blade Runner already being a cult film, not many people were interested. Despite everything about this, the project was given $150 million, which is the same budget of Frozen. This film had so much money put into it, and yet it was used to tell an interesting new story that still ties in with the original. You cannot watch this film if you haven't seen the original, or else it will make no sense. It is a movie that does not care to bring a new audience in. It is a movie that has the sole purpose of continuing an unfinished story while portraying a new narrative. Take my least favorite sequel ever made, An American Werewolf in Paris. It is a movie that follows up An American Werewolf in London, a movie where the main character dies. Why was this sequel made? Well, the answer is simple: money. And that's not the case with Blade Runner 2049, as the ending to the original was a cliffhanger that left so much story to be told. How much of a shame would it have been that a world this unique and this revolutionary was just used to tell one small-scale story about human nature? This is a movie that was made not for vanity, but passion, like all good films should be. The entire production for Blade Runner 2049 has endless passion and creativity shining everywhere throughout the film. I often believe that the director is the most important person in determining how good a movie will be, and they got quite possibly the best of the new generation, Denis Villeneuve, the person who previously made the other best sci-fi movie of the decade in Arrival and the compelling thriller Prisoners, and now Dune. He created something that was somehow even more beautiful than the timeless original, and one of my favorite movies ever made. Bear with me today as I talk about Blade Runner 2049. There is an opening text crawl again in this film, but now it brings up how the former replicant models rebelled, which makes tons of sense after the outcome of Roy. Tyrell even went bankrupt to give way to industrialist Neander Wallace, who is unfortunately played by Jared Leto. We can infer from the wording used in the text scroll that Wallace is the opposite of Tyrell. Tyrell did care about the replicants he made, and he was a scientist before a businessman, which is precisely why his company failed in the end. Wallace is all about making the replicants obey, which we'll find out later is done through rigorous, repeated testing, in which those scenes have a particular style that is both repetitive and annoying, but enthralling at the same time. If we go back to Deckard being a replicant, it fits the description this movie gives. We now know that Blade Runners can be replicants, but their newer models are only permitted to kill older ones, which is exactly what Deckard was. This is why I do believe he wasn't made by Tyrell, but maybe some other company. Now, there are several other advanced replicant models, which paints this perspective that all replicants will eventually be killed by newer replicants, so it's just an endless cycle of death. When you think about humanity and how life will eventually give to make more for the future, then it connects to the themes of the first movie about human nature. Now, you see how there's new details added to the world that still connect with the original's themes. That is just more proof to add to how fantastic this is of a sequel. It still feels like Blade Runner, but it's an entirely different movie to the original. When the text crawl ends, our first shot is of an eye opening, because to back up that last statement, this is a Blade Runner sequel that continues the original themes while still giving new ones that I'm about to get into. Soon, we're seeing a flying car go through these weird buildings, soon revealed to be a farm of sorts. It's different enough from the original, but still, once again, feels like Blade Runner. The droning score continues this time, done by Hans Zimmer, and like all of his other work, it adds to the experience highly. It still feels huge in scale, like something big is about to go down. We must wonder what the guy in the flying car's business is here. This place seems so far out of the way, and there's only one person who resides here, seemingly. Soon, the guy in the flying car lands and sneaks into the resident's home, and has a seat before the resident would walk into the room. Another thing worth pointing out is the difference in audio design between the arrival and the actual conflict about to happen. Hans Zimmer is very abrasive and loud, but the sudden quietness preceding it is a great contrast that keeps our attention. I also love the switch from overexposed to underexposed shots, still playing into the dark lighting that was a staple of the original, but when we get to the lighting inside, it's a lot more muted. And to keep in mind, we do pretty much live in a wasteland. The guy who flew in's name is Kay, and they have a break the ice conversation talking about the farm. Ryan Gosling and Dave Bautista seem especially somber and robotic in this scene. The black void behind Dave Bautista's character and the white one behind Ryan Gosling's character creates an amazing contrast as the color palette is once again flipped. The conversation takes a darker tone when Kay's gun gets involved, and now it is put into place that Kay is a Blade Runner and the other guy is a replicant. In a last attempt to save his life, the farmer tries to stab Kay before throwing him into a wall and tackling him through it. Though, what's peculiar is that Kay ends up on top and takes control, despite the fact that his frame is way smaller than the former wrestling actor. The lack of score here emphasizes the pain these characters feel in the fight and also creates tension in a way that doesn't feel overly bombastic. You can tell someone is a replicant by a code that is located in guess where? The eye, in which Kay scans to confirm his suspicions. Kay walks away to grab his gun, but the farmer says,
"How does it feel killing your own kind?"
The replicant subplot of Deckard being a thing Deckard learns, Kay is already aware of the fact and is just a pawn to the system like every other replicant. Though the farmer points out that
models are happy scraping the shit. Because you've never seen a miracle.
Kay swiftly kills the farmer with his gun. The farmer is a replicant, but as we saw, he had emotions and his own intentions. To see the robotic Kay kill him like nothing already continues the idea that I had about Blade Runners being awful people and sets up Kay's own arc. Kay takes his eyeball and goes back to his car before talking with his boss, who confirms that the farmer went AWOL, which as we saw wasn't true. He just had his own way of living life. The replicants feel more human than ever with the combined experience of the first movie, except for Kay. However, Kay does see a flower grown by a tree and uses an x-ray to see that there's a box underneath it buried. A dig team comes to pick it up and Kay leaves. Now, this scene is an amazing opener, as it gets us to question Kay and what his purpose is. It's something that will be explored deeply throughout the rest of the film, with this interaction playing a huge part in something that happens later. This intro perfectly establishes the audience on what kind of movie this is going to be and sets up a lot of plot developments. The pacing of the first Blade Runner isn't exactly perfect. It suffered from having the Rachel and Deckard plotline having to be included, though this movie has the task of being 2 hours and 45 minutes, so you think it would have bad pacing, right? So many movies feel the need to be super long for no reason, and the first Blade Runner already had poor pacing, so how was it improved here? For one, the focus of the story of the original was all over the place, but the focus of 2049 rests purely on one man, that being Kay. Now, I do love huge ensemble casts, but I will always just prefer one amazingly written character over a bunch of good ones. Kay, being the focus of the plot, gives him an actual arc, which Deckard didn't really have unless you agree to him being a replicant, which I do. With this focus, the movie doesn't jump around and escalates at a more natural pace, even if the flow of information can be slow, but that information is given at a rate where we're never left like time is being wasted. The whole film feels like we're going on a journey with Kay, rather than seeing multiple angles. It pushes back the world building just a bit, because we already know the world. Of course it's still there, but now it takes up less screen time, and we have a character-focused story, which I don't know about most people, but it is certainly more my style. Though the story definitely has less interpretive elements, but instead it gives us a clear, understandable narrative that is amazing and filled with great writing that I'll get into. Also, while not everything is practical, there are still tons of amazing models and hand-built sets that are even better than what the original could do. This movie is a technological achievement. The effects never get in the way and always enhance the movie. Even then, Denis has mastered the art of blocking and framing to a T. Every motion feels calculated and each shot is amazing. Roger Deakins also gets a lot of credit here, but I will still always point to Denis Villeneuve for making this the masterpiece it always could be. It's such a beautiful and striking film, and quite possibly the greatest visual experience a movie can offer. Just look at some of these images. Just like the original, the colors of this movie are important, and they often set up the tone for the film. Take the previous scene where Kay picks up the flower, and notice how the background is blank white, which highlights Kay's isolation here. It's an easy way to relate to a character when you show them by themselves for the majority of the story. Everyone knows what it's like to be alone, and it sucks. We sympathize with Kay for this reason, and we later find out that the only connection he has is to an AI hologram. The scene with Kay going into the city is short but fantastic. The original had to create a new world, but for 2049 it has to show how that world has changed. Right now, living on other planets is by far a more popular option due to stuff like the radiation. The majority of this city is completely colorless, but it's still visually striking, as we're seeing a futuristic city that is now abandoned. But, to stick with the Blade Runner tradition, once we get into the city, neon lights run rampant, but even then not as much as the original. These are establishing shots with a clear purpose, rather than to pad out time. It tells a story through just its sheer visuals and aggressive sound design. We get to a big building where a dialogue starts with Kay and another person that we soon find out is the new baseline test to make sure a replicant is under control. The repetition of this scene gives it this surreal, mysterious tone. Just listen to the first thing Kay says. And blood-black nothingness begins to spin, a system of cells interlinked within cells, interlinked within cells, interlinked within one stem. It's so weird, and it sets the tone of the baseline test so well. The conversation starts while Kay is walking to it, and while he is walking into it, he gets called a skin job. This interaction may seem small, but I actually think it correlates to replicants being a metaphor to race amazingly. In the original, replicants were to be slaves, but now they can at least live normally, but face constant scorn from the public. The bright white lights against the dark clothes people are wearing is also a great contrast. Kay's expression of looking annoyed but knowing he can't do anything about it, so he swiftly returns to a straight face, is just another relatable little quirk about this replicant, but he still acts robotic in the baseline test. Kay is asked questions, but each question ends with the word cells. Each question, Kay has to repeat the word. It's repetitive and draining on the audience. Each question could actually be given an interesting answer from Kay, but he never actually answers them. Each question feels like an emotional test, but he's not allowed to give an emotional response. It's almost like an anti-void conf test. He starts saying interlinked instead of cells, but the questions are still super personal.
Do they keep you in a cell? Cells.
Cells.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells.
Cells.
Interlinked.
Interlinked.
What's it like to hold the hand of someone you love? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do they teach you how to feel finger to finger? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do you long for having your heart interlinked? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
All the response we get is cells and interlinked, and it's frustrating as an audience member that we can see this individual can't express himself, adding more to his relatability. Also, that string noise is subtle but contributes to the intensity of the scene. The scene ends and he collects his bonus and returns home. With him walking to his house, advertisements blaze over the loudspeakers for stuff like off-world adventuring, robots, and delivery services, allowing the greed that has overtaken this small part of the city. Also, the shots are just beautiful, with colors blazing in the few advertisements we see, but dark black everywhere else, to show how much the government has given up with the bright white lights from the vehicles making Kay visible. Soon we get introduced to Kay's AI girlfriend, and this entire plotline was ahead of its time if you ask me. We know of replicants, but this is a weird new invention to have in this world. An AI into a hologram. If we remember earlier, these are called Joi Bots. On the internet, there are now tons of AI chat rooms, but this one has a physical presence, and the fact that we're really close to this is scary. Future says a lot. Anyway, back to Blade Runner. The first interaction between each other is Kay mentioning how he ruins his shirt, but the first thing Joi says is how she could fix it. This will come back later, so keep it in the back of your head. Joi makes food, which is just a hologram that she puts over a disgusting bowl of food that I don't even know what it is. I don't think this really means anything, but this might be a reference to how food is in the 1985 film Brazil, which that film is among one of my favorites. Go check it out. Where the food in that movie is just a bunch of green goop with pictures of what it's supposed to taste like, which I think is what is being implied here. Now, the original had a very boring romance, and while Ana de Armas has a strange accent that we find out later that Joi can have whatever voice the buyer wants, I actually do like the romance of this film. Some scenes can be a little awkward, but now it's clearly the reason, as Kay is a replicant and Joi is a hologram, and it all feels artificial, mostly because it is. In this scene, Joi is constantly switching up outfits to whatever a moment situation calls for. Kay even has Joi pretend it's an anniversary just so he can give Joi a gift. Also, the transparent effect always looks super great, and I'll bring it up whenever it is especially good. Gift is an emanator, and what that does is allow Joi to appear forever as long as Kay is close. They go out into the rain, where the rain initially goes through Joi, causing her to glitch before her body automatically generates rain droplets onto her body, which is an amazing detail that I'm glad is in the film. Joi soon rubs Kay's hand against her face, but it's still not real contact. Joi says,
"I'm so happy when I'm with you."
You don't have to say that.
This suggests to us that Kay is aware that his girlfriend AI is an AI, but even then, he still has her. Another detail about this scene is Joi never tries to phase through Kay, but whenever Kay has to move, Joi will phase through him. You can already tell by just a few minor actions how the Joi is programmed, and how even though Kay is a replicant, his actions don't feel programmed at all. AI will not replace humanity as much as some people think it might. Even in this high-tech world, the AI still feels like an AI. The scene is masterfully shot too. While this is a two-person interaction, it stays away from the still camera A, camera B shots. It starts out with the camera in a hallway, which is green, before panning to the balcony, which is blue, before Kay walks into frame in the middle of the sign, which I like. Then it cuts back to Joi stepping outside for the first time, then to her hand, where we see how she adapts to the rain, then to a front-facing shot to then reverse back to Kay. Then the next shot goes around Joi, and then to a close-up of Kay smiling. It goes to a side shot where we can see both of them out in the rain. All these different and dynamic shots keep the scene entertaining, which is important since there is no talking. More reasons as to why Denis Villeneuve was a perfect choice for this film, and one of my favorite directors working today. He always does unique shots and scenes that are supposed to be mundane to keep your attention. As they go to kiss, Joi pauses in the middle of it so Kay can receive a voice call. The person tells him to get down to the station to see what's in the box they dug up earlier. Next scene begins, and we find out that it's a body inside, or what is now just hair and bones. They do discover it's from 30 years ago, it's a female, and the person died from childbirth. We do know that the farmer is a combat medic from earlier, but now that detail comes into play, so we can infer he did the emergency C-section that is described in the film. Kay also zooms in enough to find the serial number to infer that it's a replicant. To prove how close replicants are to humans, I like the implications that without this serial number, it easily would have been mistaken as a human body. Anyway, like all of Denis Villeneuve's films, each scene always does a little extra in the camera angle department in order to keep your attention. In a lot of movies, scenes of exposition would be shot a lot more blandly, mostly due to the fact that the director doesn't want to waste resources. But here, despite that fact, we are in a small room and we see a variety of angles. A small detail I already like is Kay is now actively asking questions and engaging in the investigation. Have a character this systematic this early on already starting to break from the cycle foreshadows his entire arc. Soon they find a number showing the body is a replicant, and we cut to the next scene where a superior to Kay is already trying to tell him what happened didn't happen and is already being told to hunt the child that was birthed from the replicant. This entire interaction is when they utilize the themes of perception. Kay is being told what to feel and what to do. It's almost like a scene that fits Deckard's character, as he was all rules and direct actions, which is just more proof to him being a replicant, with it now being less subtle for Kay, as we already know he is a replicant. Just when Deckard is about to leave the room, the superior says, "You've been getting on fine without one." Kay asks what it means, and he is told, a soul. As we saw in the opening scene, Kay admits himself that he is a replicant. There is no doubting, like we can presume Deckard went through between movies. And we can see where that interaction with the farmer earlier came from when he is directly being told that he has no soul. The scene swiftly transitions with a droning music score to lead to Kay sitting in his shuttle and staring blankly into nothing. It's a great way to show that now Kay is aware that something more sinister is going on. He is well aware that he is being told exactly what to do and that he is being manipulated, but he doesn't have the experience to combat it. He's clearly clueless and lost, not knowing what to do. His upbringing, if he even had one, has not prepared him for this moment. This emotion is only conveyed through Ryan Gosling's stoic acting, and it's one I don't see tackled enough. We then have an amazing establishing shot of the city that pans diagonally downwards back into Kay flying. We cut to a blue side profile shot of Kay in his shuttle, and the words of the farmer come back to Kay. "And you new models are happy scraping the shit because you've never seen a miracle." First off, I love the cut from side profile at the beginning of the line to a close-up of Kay's blank stare, but when the final line is delivered, Kay gets surrounded by darkness before cutting to a faraway shot of his shuttle arriving at the Earth headquarters. We, as an audience member, are in the same place and time as Kay. This is an internal conflict, and we both question what that line means, but we do have more context to it now. Kay right now is trying to hunt someone who may be a replicant, so we understand the farmer's frustration in it, but what is the miracle? Was the miracle by any chance the birth of a child? If it is, then why is this something that Kay can't see the importance of? This entire scene evolves so much from the original themes. In the original, only one replicant death that meant something to the protagonist was Batty, which was the last death of the film. It's great that we still have replicant deaths that mean something, as otherwise this movie wouldn't feel as in touch with the original. This time, however, the replicant death is at the beginning of the story and has huge ramifications for the entire story. His last words, just like Batty, lead the questioning of one owns humanity, but this time in the opposite direction. It's reincorporation while still providing us with something fresh. So many of these types of sequels don't bother to do this. Instead, you'll have things like the new Star Wars films, which have dumb references to the originals that isn't really used to progress the plot. It's just sort of there for the sake of making an audience member point at the screen and say, "I remember that." Now we arrive at the Earth headquarters manned by the Wallace company, which we know made the Joi AI and also a few other things. We soon know that they do replicant stuff as well, which is why Kay is there to see if they have any info on the serial number. For the majority of this film, we've been in whites and blacks, but after the last scene, we are now surrounded by a vibrant yellow. The receptionist scans the piece of hair and Kay gives the serial number, and they find out the replicant was pre-blackout. And if we recall earlier, Wallace only formed after the blackout, in which they absorbed Tyrell Corporation, which we later find is where it came from. So it makes sense as to why they'd have the little information regarding the serial number. Soon we lead to a woman called Love explaining replicants to a person who we believe is a buyer, talking about how customizable they are. The replicants are to be used on a drill site, so this interaction shows us that replicants are still used for this purpose. The weird yellow lighting in these scenes make this place strangely haunting. The architecture is super minimalist, but when it's crowded in yellow lighting, it's strange. Soon we get this amazing shot of the database, and it's simply incredible, not much else to say. The receptionist walks Kay down, then a conversation about the blackout begins. Everyone remembers where they were at the blackout. You? Kay then says it was before his time, making us estimate that he is in his late 20s. They find a little more info, however, when Love enters the scene. She mentions that another prodigal serial number returns. Whoever this is, it is one of the original models. Love talks about how cool Mr. Wallace is, and something I do love about these scenes of small talk is how the lighting follows the character in a way that makes them feel like they are being watched by some greater power, mostly because they are. The conversation they have here is well written and gives us insight into the world, while maintaining a conversation. Like when Kay's Joi Bot does a ringtone thing and Love recognizes it, to then ask if he enjoys the product. Anyway, they soon go into a separate data room that goes into a bluish-white color. They show a memory fragment that correlates to the serial number, and we find out that that serial number belongs to Rachel. With all this build-up, admittedly it is kind of obvious, but still it shows how this story continues off of the original. Essentially, the basic objective of this movie is to find Rachel's kid and reunite them with their father, who we're led to believe is Deckard. It then replays a segment of the Voight-Kampff test, in which I'm glad the footage shown to us is only of the eye, as otherwise it would be stupid due to the fact it was the only thing recorded in the original. I do want to bring up the question,
suddenly you realize there's a wasp crawling on your arm,
with Rachel immediately responding with,
I'd kill it.
This comes back later, so keep it in the back of your head. Love asks Kay if there's any reason to issue an investigation, but Kay doesn't answer it and immediately ignores it, which shows that he does not trust her. Now for one of the few scenes I dislike. It's only a minute, but it's the only time the reincorporation doesn't work for me. Kay meets up with the origami guy, and first off, I must ask what led Kay here. This film has pretty much shown all of how Kay ends up where he does, and this is just unexplained. Second, this scene is really just fan service because this character only really talks about what Deckard was like and where to find him, in which he doesn't know. The one thing that saves this scene is when he brings up that he could see Deckard wasn't long for this world, because he could see it in his eyes, which is a nice touch as eyes are what determine replicants if you remember. Also, the depiction of the retirement home the origami guy is in is uninspired and boring. Anyway, the next scene features Neander Wallace and Love for the first time. Now I have to give praise to Jared Leto, unfortunately. Despite the fact that he is a horrible person, he's actually quite good in this movie. He fits the dreamlike stoicness of a lot of the other performances, and he's very creepy. He's a great contrast to Tyrell in the first one, who was filled with passion for his creations. Meanwhile, Wallace only cares for the monetary value of his products, which is why he beat Tyrell Corporation at the end of the day. Leto has the really great creepy eye contacts that give him a presence of someone with tons of power and control. For the first time ever, though, we get to see a replicant being birthed, which is once again a great way to expand upon the original in a way that doesn't feel forced. I also love how the shot begins with the replicant body in the exact middle of the screen, but then falls down to the ground to show how even from birth, replicants are below humans, because for the rest of the scene, Wallace stands taller than the replicant. Yellow oval light surrounds the replicant with the doorway of the shot blocking the sides to put emphasis to the middle of the screen. Then we get a 47-second take that is extremely well put together. It starts out by zooming in on the twitching, just now waking replicant lady who seems uncomfortable. It's a slow zoom in that makes us uncomfortable and gives an idea of how terrible Wallace is. He doesn't try to comfort her or make her feel worthy of life. like when Tyrell interacted with Batty. All Wallace does is give her a towel and that's it. The music too is phenomenal, with Hans Zimmer's droning, rising score adding to the scene greatly. The slow zoom in of the shot finally stops when Wallace kneels over and runs his hands across her face. His monologue is ominous, and I like to imagine the perspective of the replicant seeing this strange man with weird eyes saying something so incomprehensive and being terrified. The effect of the clay looks great, by the way, almost as if when Wallace runs his hand over her, he is by accident shaping her skin. Anyway, he then mentions how we are born with a fear of death, which is foreshadowing to when he actually kills the replicant, which I'll get into in a bit. Wallace says he only makes good angels, which is a line that to me shows how pretentious he is, especially when he says that there were bad angels, but he didn't make them. There is 3 main focuses in this scene, that being love, the replicant, and Wallace, with them serving as a similar dynamic to the eye engineer scene in the original, with Wallace being the intimidating speaker, love being the background observer, and the replicant being the terrified victim, which is the opposite of how it was in that original scene. Wallace never raises his voice in this scene, maintaining a quiet, threatening tone that cannot be questioned back at.
It's fascinating. Before we even know what we are, we fear to lose it.
Earlier in this interaction, Wallace said we should own the stars. That is his goal, and I bring it up now because he then touches her stomach, comparing it to dead space between the stars before slicing it open, killing her. The idea that replicants can procreate is one that is seen as a financial opportunity to him. So ones that don't meet this standard are to be killed, as the value of human/replicant life is worthless to Wallace. Blood rains down her body, and she trembles before him, remaining standing, creating a very interesting visual as the blood serves to be a changing color palette of the bright yellow. He mentions the importance of procreation and how it's something that he lacks in his replicants compared to Tyrell. Like the reverse of Batty, he kisses his creation before walking away, to then demand love to bring him the child of Rachel. The scene ends. This scene is phenomenal for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that because it establishes the motivations of the villains perfectly, and it continues and expands upon the themes of the original. It then creates a terrifying atmosphere with its direction and set design, while also giving us some amazing acting. This is a real highlight in the film, and it's one of the film's best scenes. We go into the next scene with a loud sound that is very Hans Zimmer-like, and we see a busy city street that rain is striking down upon. The lighting of the scene makes it feel like it is daytime, but the opening shot shows that it is nighttime. I love how huge the ballerina dancers appear to be. All the lights and stuff are just there to advertise products rather than light up a night, but it does it anyway. It's really sad that we're not even far from this in real life. The set design reinforces this world so much through just its visuals, showing how the world has been taken over by the corporations. The entire sequence of establishing shots is just well put together, with tons of moving parts in them. I often call Denis Villeneuve the modern-day Kurosawa, as just like him, there's always tons of moving parts to a shot. Look at the torture scene in Prisoners, and how each performance has its own dynamic to that scene. All the extras minding their own business while the rain pours on them is a simple but necessary tactic to get us to believe in this world. I like how there's an entire wall that has a vending machine baked into it. I could go on how great this set design really is in this movie, but I believe it to be the best of all time, and there isn't much more to say. Anyway, we see Kay looking over the picture of the tree where Rachel's body was found earlier. We then see a long take following the back of a new character that enters the scene. During this long take, we see a hologram of Joi dancing. We see the new character walk over to a group of prostitutes to instruct them to go to Kay and find out what he knows. During this scene, we also see a shot of a very public brothel, which is just gross with how shameless it is from the business owners to have something like this in such an open space. Also, some citizens have the transparent rain poncho Zora was using in the original, which is a nice touch. We then see the prostitutes crowd around Kay, which is a scene that out of context makes all the sense in the world because just look at Ryan Gosling. One prostitute remains as the others leave the shot. She tries to flirt with him, but Kay doesn't really respond to any advances, so it's just awkward before his Joi ringtone goes off, and she remarks that he's not into real girls before she leaves. This interaction is brief, but it does come back later. Anyway, a quick cut shows us that Kay is going back to the farmer's house where there is no external noise, which is weird for Blade Runner. Usually rain crowds the audio in these movies, so without it, Kay just feels lonely and left to fend for himself, especially when he sits on his couch and looks around blankly, much like the scene from earlier. However, he sees something in the corner. A while back, I mentioned in the first Blade Runner how the piano represents time. I chose not to talk about the one in this scene, but it also represents the future, shows the present, and highlights the past. It's rusty and one of the keys does not work. With it being abandoned, it now has no caretaker, no one to play with it. It's Kay's fault that it's being abandoned. He now starts to question his own actions and now grieves for the first time. He finds a picture of what is presumably the farmer's wife, and he's holding a baby. He now realizes what he has done. This piano and the picture he finds represent what Kay must do in the future and what is wrong with his present, but shows the farmer's past. It shakes his trust with his employees and gives him doubt. The scene of the darkly lit house transitions to the bright exterior where Kay notices the numbers 6, 10, 21. We as an audience don't know what this is, and the follow-up shot of the flames and the toy horse enforces the idea that as of now, we as an audience are shown something we don't know about Kay. He's not just an audience surrogate, but up until now, it was easy to see him as just that. This scene shows us something abnormal that is related to him. It breaks our connection to him and shows how he is his own person, and now it's up to the film to show us that. By showing these visuals without an explanation, it gets us to wonder what his past is, if he even had one. Kay does not say anything during this entire sequence. Ryan Gosling in his performance is able to enforce the emotions of the scene through just his blocking and facial expressions. It's a scene that treats the audience to be smart rather than blatantly explain everything and give exposition. The exposition is given visually, and it's awesome. We get a feel for his loneliness in this shot where he's standing next to the tree contemplating as the white background highlights him and how there's nothing for miles in the background. He's alone in this world, left to fight for himself, and this approach to storytelling is just something that sticks with me personally. I always prefer having one extremely well-developed character over a bunch of mediocre characters. It gives us a clear focus on the characters in the story, and to do that with a Blade Runner screenplay was bold and a great decision to tell an interesting story. Kay burns the farmer's house before the scene ends. I can't really tell you what this means for once. Maybe it's him taking out his frustrations or trying to hide from his mistakes. It's slightly out of place for his character, but either way, we get this amazing shot of him walking away from it. We then lead into Love killing this guy called Coco and stealing the bones of Rachel. We don't really know why she does this, but I kind of like that aspect, as it makes her character seem more unpredictable and unreasonable, which is a good trait for our main villain to have. Only thing worth pointing out in the scene also is the uncomfortable silence. The lack of external noise, as I said earlier, is super different from the original, which is something I believe it contributes to emphasize how little people are left and lonely it can be in this world. We then lead into a scene with Joshi, who is a character who appeared earlier, but is now worth bringing up. She's just an officer who has authority over Kay, who is also in the scene. She mentions how Coco died and how the bones are missing. She soon starts to drink, and I love how the direction of the scene shows a passage of time through this cut. Kay has anti-chemistry with this lady, which shows how different in position and personality these two characters are. It shows the rift between replicants and humans that society has created. This is what leads into the icebreaker questions after she drinks, as she doesn't know how to communicate with this man. She laments how his kind didn't exist when she was little. Soon she asks about Kay's memories, who he swiftly points out are fake. Despite this, Joshi orders Kay for a memory, and he obliges due to once again that rift between them. He recalls a time when he was a kid at an orphanage, and how he had a toy horse he really liked. Unfortunately, all the other kids wanted to have it, and they chased him down for it. He then places it in a vent to hide it, and when the kids catch up to him, they beat him up, demanding where it is. Now, this memory seems fake though. The visuals accompanying it show all the kids with the same buzz cut hairstyle, while Kay has hair. All the kids even look similar, making it seem like something that was forged. The state of the world is emphasized hugely when we see the orphanage, as it's an industrial and dirty complex. Joshi says the line,
Little Kay fighting for what's his.
After Kay is done telling her about it, she then says,
We're all just looking out for something real.
almost as if to turn him down from believing that that memory was real. Kay asks if he should get back to work, then the scene ends. Kay then goes to a DNA library where he's searching for DNA codes from the date 6, 10, and 21. I like to imagine he's super bored doing this, which is why he summons Joi to keep him company. The shot here is already super iconic and vastly spread around the internet, as it just showcases perfect blocking. Kay low to the ground, sitting the customer. Joi stands high, leaning over him, the product. It's visual, subtle storytelling in just one shot. While Kay is looking for DNA, there is a small detail I want to point out that to me can be read to mean so much more. Notice how the intrinsic audio is very quiet, so we're left to focus on the dialogue. What fills in the empty space is an exposition dump not by Kay, but by Joi. To me, exposition dumps by dialogue aren't really like Blade Runner. To go back to the original cut of the first movie, there were exposition dumps and it was out of place and forced. But now it's back, but notice who's saying it. It's Joi. No matter how you look at it, Joi is not human. She is a programmed AI just filling the main character with information that could be found on a Google search. Dialogue exposition dumps about the world and tech in most movies don't really work for me as often. I usually just prefer showing it through backdrops like the original Blade Runner. Dialogue exposition dumps are soulless and usually expose a character as being inhuman, as it's just to tell the audience a piece of information. This small little scene of some of the only exposition dumps throughout the series through dialogue means so much on the world itself and is a subversion of the common screenplay, and I love it. Though what Joi says starts to be important when she brings up a detail he left out to Joshi. The date on the back of the horse toy is 6/10/21. She uses this as a way to bring up that he's important and special, comforting him in a moment of vulnerability, but Kay eats it up as it's the only thing keeping him happy. Kay counterpoints, however, by saying he doesn't even know if the horse memory was real, but is quickly shot down again by Joi by saying it's okay to dream a little. He soon finds that there are two DNA codes identical to each other on the same date, male and female through the same orphanage. The girl died through a genetic disorder while the boy disappeared. It's starting to become a little obvious that Kay is the boy, but he still doesn't think he is human. Everything about his life has told him the opposite until now. It's implied this is the same orphanage he grew up on, as he offers to take Joi a ride. Haha, very funny, before the scene ends. So this scene is a great way to hint at Kay's arc while showing off his relationship with Joi. It's a fantastically constructed scene that I want to highlight the shot composition. It's essentially alternates between a few different shots. Front profile of Kay, side profile of Kay, the DNA computer screen, and a few more. There is a quick shot to show the hologram horse Joi is holding before it cuts into a type of shot in between the front and the side to show Kay's conflicted emotional state before going to the side for Kay to reject those emotions. When it goes to the front, we get to see how all over Joi is for Kay, almost like to show how massive of a presence she is visually, but still have Kay be a big part of the shot so you get to see his reactions. There is a reason people have made a meme of this scene, and that's because the shot composition is simple but recognizable in a way that makes complete visual sense to anyone who doesn't even get to hear the dialogue. Turn off the audio and you get an interesting effect where you can understand everything that is going on in the scene through just the power of blocking. We then move to Kay and Joi in the flying car, and it's almost standard to have beautiful establishing shots of the characters traveling to the next location in this film, but I will say the music is especially good in these scenes. Now, I'm not a music specialist, but the rising of the horn noise and softening of it creates this amazing feeling that I have a hard time describing what the feeling is, but it is incredible. I do like how distant Kay is with Joi. Kay just focusing on driving with a blank face, while Joi is curiously looking around. Even when he is with someone, Kay feels isolated from the world. We now move into an area of LA where it is just a huge dump, much like it is in real life, haha. Virtually abandoned with buildings in ruin with these huge ships dumping trash all over. It's different from what we saw in the original, but at the same time, say it with me now, expands on the original in a new way to complement the story. A harpoon latches onto Kay's car, and he comes crashing down. After he lands, a bunch of scavengers surround the crashed car, and what I love about the setup of this scene is that it features Kay given direct attention by more than one person. Without even given a chance to show how he'd interact with them, one attacks, and almost like a defense mechanism with no control, he immediately breaks the guy's back Bane style and shoots only 2 people with guns. It feels automated, reminding us that he isn't human, no matter how much we want to believe it. I also think the shot composition here is super great once you slow it down. It's one of the few action moments, but even then, it's done better than most other action films. We get the shot where he walks out of the car, cutting to the man with the wrench starting his swing, to the next shot ending the swing, with that shot having all the scavengers on screen and showing the impact of the scene, then cutting to Kay picking the scavenger up, then another shot to show the clear impact, then cutting to show the scavenger's reactions, then cut to a scavenger attacking Kay from off screen, then a cut to the scavenger putting him in a chokehold, cut again to the wide shot showing off all the people, and the beginning of Kay's escape from the choke, then Kay putting the scavenger in a guillotine, and then cut to Kay gunning down the 2 people. It's fast enough that it keeps our eyes glued, but it cuts in a way that shows us everything and doesn't hide the impact. It's quick and brief, but also has a purpose to show Kay's efficiency at his job. Without much warning, missiles start to get launched from the sky, shown in a bit to be Love's doing, but the initial shock of the explosions is a great way to catch us off guard at first. Now we get around 2 minutes worth of establishing shots to show off the ground level of the location. Something I really like about these shots is how Kay remains a prominent part of all of them to show us how he's analyzing his surroundings, because after all, the previous action sequence was something he was unprepared for, so it makes sense why he'd be cautious. The over-the-shoulder shots in the scene contrast with the far-out shots of Kay appearing tiny. If you remember earlier, the shots of Ryan Gosling were more the second option, but as the film goes on, we see more close-ups of Kay. This helps us quite literally get closer with the main character and have us put ourselves in his shoes, while also showing his growth to the audience to interact with the world more and slowly become into his own person, which I'll get into soon. Anyway, the orphanage is only a few steps away, which is a little too convenient as he was forcibly dragged down, so that's a bit of a problem. The music subtly rises as he climbs the heap of trash when he enters the orphanage. When he enters the orphanage, he's greeted by mostly children with buzz cuts like his memories. These children are all laborers who are building something we don't really know. We do get more expositionary dialogue from the person running the operation, explaining to Kay what's going on, so it's realistic for the story and isn't too long. Kay asks if a little boy was here 30 years ago, referencing to himself, but the guy running says that he doesn't keep records that far back. Kay then threatens him by punching him in the nose with his gun. The environmental detail of the orphanage, like I mentioned a while ago, is fantastic. It's cool in a movie set in the future that we see old industrial complexes and modern depictions of farms with abandoned cities in the same movie. It's reasonably diverse when we consider the state of the world, while also giving us a difference of location to keep us entertained. I especially like the shot here where 2 guys appear super tiny in a huge empty space. We are near the place where Kay has his flashback as some of the shots repeat from that sequence. The guy running quickly goes through his books, and the sounds of every tiny movement being echoed is haunting, and a great detail in the sound design department. The guy looks through the records in his office and sees that the year Kay was referring to had been torn. The panic the guy goes through to find it, knowing that his death is potentially near, is fantastic, so props to the actor Lenny James. He cries out that it wasn't him as Kay searches himself and stares blankly at the book. Ryan Gosling's blank, emotionless expression here is a bit of a meme, but within the context of the movie is great, showing how currently unhuman he sees himself as, while also showing disappointment. He sees a horse ashtray and remembers that there is one thing to verify his existence at the orphanage. Now it's time for one of my favorite sequences of the entire movie, one that I'm going to hyper-analyze every detail. Kay walks outside, leaving the office, and at first it's quiet. He stares in the direction of the furnace, and then it cuts to an above shot where Kay nearly blends in. He's lost, and so are we. Each step is slow and methodical. Kay is nervous and scared. The noise of the background gets louder and louder as he gets closer. Kay is consumed by shadow, and we can't see how he feels. To hide the emotions of a character at this pivotal point in the story is so cruel, but it adds to the suspense amazingly. We finally get a clear shot as he walks towards the camera before reverse shotting to behind his head, and now he's at the furnace. Put yourself in Kay's mind. He has been told his entire life that he isn't human. He is a machine programmed to do one thing, and this is the only thing to prove his humanity. The background noise gets even louder. If you're watching this film with loud speakers, it encompasses you. This scene is so slow, yet it's so important. This scene will decide where the movie goes, and it nearly kills you having to wait. This is the darkest the movie gets, and to leave the audience unable to see during an important time is such a bold move that I respect. We go back to not being able to see him again. We don't know how he is feeling, but we can only guess. He kneels down, opens the furnace, and with the sound design blazing, he pulls out the toy horse, and the bottom reads 6/10/21. We cut to a close-up of Kay, and he stares at it blankly, but he's shaking. This shot holds for 20 straight seconds, emphasizing the powerful state of Kay's emotions. What makes this scene so fantastic is that we are finding out with the character that he's been lied to. His memories are real, and yet he's presented himself as stoic and emotionless, but he is real. He is a person born and raised, yet he still feels empty. That feeling of realizing you've been lied to is something that I've been suffering from recently, and this film captures it perfectly. Who is Kay to trust now? What purpose does he have? When watching this film for the first time, it feels like this type of scene would be near the end, but no, it's right in the middle. Now we get to see what Kay does with this info. We then get an excellent cut to the toy horse sitting on Kay's table. This little cut is super great as the music tunes down as it cuts. It's close enough to the horse where you don't see the background too well, but gives us enough time to realize we transition to a new place. Joi tells Kay how he is special in a pulled back shot before cutting to this close-up of Kay where he's contemplating. Notice how after a few seconds, Joi steps up into the corner of the shot before it reverses shots back to Joi. Joi then names him Joe, which remember this is important. Another thing to take note of is how much Joi is trying to value his importance. It feels programmed with how far she takes her wording, almost as if this is what it takes for Joi Bots to exist. However, Kay does respond negatively when he says,
Stop.
After the horse scene, Kay feels different. He's finally starting to realize the facade that is Joi. Joi is tearing up during all this while Kay is having a hard time keeping his head up.
How do I know if a memory is an implant or not?
Who makes the memories?
With this line from Joi, we cut to a forest with a woman in the middle of it. Kay then walks into the scene through a door and the forest fades away. The green color of nature contrasts a lot with this film, and it's a great way to show how memories are made. The memory maker is a really tragic character. She's trapped in a box due to a poor immune system, left to do the other thing she knows how to do, which is make memories. In a way, her circumstance starts to feel similar to Kay.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells.
Except Kay is trapped in a bigger prison. I really like the line where the memory maker explained why she's good at this.
Well, there's a bit of every artist in their work. But I was locked in a sterile chamber at 8, so if I wanted to see the world, I had to imagine it.
The switch from pure white to pure black in this scene, like always, is super great. The explanation of the memory maker being in black is especially good because it puts our focus on the color, while the white is great because that's when the interactions are personal. Kay sits down and does a test where he thinks about his memories. Kay, like always, looks really neutral during this scene at first. Ryan Gosling's subtle shift from a normal expression to slowly looking more anxious is great. The scene becomes super uncomfortable as the shots stick for long periods of time. I love that the memory maker breaks down crying, finding that the orphanage memory is real. She says someone lived this. Kay has so much proof to show his existence. He says twice over that he knows it's real. The music goes up slowly while Kay's tone is still quiet. The music puts a lot of attention to Kay's mood right now. This is a man struggling with the fact that he is human, a lie that he is now having to break. All those thoughts are internalized, but it's so easy to read due to the blocking in music. Ryan Gosling says the first "I know it's real" line looking straight forwards. However, he then covers his face, says it again, having a hard time making eye contact, then he explodes. What does Kay do now with this freedom? Can he keep living a lie, or does he do something new? What is his purpose? The sudden explosion of noise from Kay is jarring. The sound design in this film is super great. When you look at Kay's scenes, you'll realize the audio waves are really small, but here it explodes. Kay, for once in this film, showed us a non-robotic reaction. I love this scene so much. Kay very much should be acting differently, but that is not the usual for him. He is struggling to change because that isn't how he has treated people and himself. The sound design, as I pointed out, is fantastic, helping the scene greatly, especially since Ryan Gosling's facial expressions are supposed to be robotic and hard to read, so the music helps you relate to him. When he yells, it's all clear. This shot of Kay lasts nearly 45 seconds, but it doesn't feel dragged out because of the music and the shot composition. The camera moves with Kay's head, which is a subtle enough detail to add energy to the shot. We never saw Kay enter the Memory Maker building, so it's important to establish its location after he leaves. The first shot is a wide shot, once again doing that thing where it makes Kay feel small. The snow falling down adds to the atmosphere as Kay slowly walks to the car, which is a big focus of the shot. This leads to the shot from the car's POV before it finally cuts to a more personal shot. Kay looks down at his human hand, and then it cuts to the same angle but pulled back. Kay looks up at the sky before looking back down to his hand. He's blank again, but now that blank expression is given when he looks at himself. This is a great way visually to show him coming to terms, as the shot insinuates him thinking deep about himself. Denis Villeneuve also uses this same shot to show him getting arrested, keeping the pacing of the screenplay intact. The shot here is oh so great. The fact that we're still making Kay appear small now hints at something new. He's no longer small because he's a replicant and doesn't matter. He's still small because he's a human and doesn't matter. The main focus of the shot is the police shuttle, and Kay's card being similar size combined with the buildings really takes away his focus when the audience may not necessarily want it. When you obscure the main character at his peak of self-realization, you add more to the idea that he may not be important. The baseline test soon happens again, and we get a repeat of the baseline test, which now more questions spring up. The last baseline test scene was great because it was frustrating. However, this scene, when done again, makes it all clear. We know the answers to these questions as we've been following Kay for a while now. However, the question doesn't feel repetitive because their format switches constantly. Due to the fact these questions are new, we can infer they are optional and only given when those results start to look bad. This state of confusion and randomness echoes Kay's sentiment so well, and it also makes sense lore-wise on why these questions would be placed in the test. Kay is not the first example of a replicant malfunctioning. Kay is not a special case. The result that Kay gets is because the questions are designed to target human response, so that means it must have been developed for loads of other replicants. Once again, Kay is not important. Kay gets a scalding too by Joshi. Kay interrupts her and mentions how he found the kid.
He was set up like a standard replicant, put on a service job. Even he didn't know who he was.
Obviously, Kay is referring to himself, showing his newfound self-awareness. Sternly, he brings up that the job is done. Joshi brings up how his next baseline is not from her, and that he must submit his gun and badge. Kay leaves, and we get more fantastic establishing shots, now with the camera following Kay, rather than him being part of a given shot. This focus being put more onto the characters rather than the world of Blade Runner is a big reason on how this film bettered the original. Just my personal opinion, but I will always take more character-layered stories over big, expensive worlds. The original created a world, and now we're finally getting a main character that interacts with it in a way that makes the character side of the story more interesting. Kay arrives in his apartment and is immediately greeted by Joi. Kay says,
"You were right about everything."
This refers to the lines where Joi mentions he was a real boy. However, what I love is that Joi isn't real. That should be more apparent right now. Almost feels like Kay should leave her, but Joi has a card up her sleeve. The prostitute from earlier shows up. Notice how Joi walks up to the frame and the prostitute entrance is supported by Kay's reaction zooming out. Then when it gets back to reverse shot, the prostitute enters one of these shots. The lady is on the right and Joi is on the left, and we get shots that very clearly show the divide between them, as well as showing the soon-to-be merge. I define good directions in films in terms of the variety of shot composition and blocking. In just one scene, we get different types of shots at multiple angles with different ways actors move in them. As I've pointed out, this type of thing exists all throughout Blade Runner 2049. It's why I give so much credit to Denis Villeneuve for the success of this movie. This scene is a small inclusion, and some may wonder why it is here. This is a scene where Kay makes out with a prostitute that has Joi's hologram all over it. What I love about this scene is it feels like a desperate plea from Joi. Kay has a physical body for Joi now, but Joi still isn't real. This hologram glitches out and things become misaligned. The cracks of Joi start to fade for us. The effect is so great and uncanny, it emphasizes how weird this situation is for Kay without even having to say anything at all. Anyway, let's speed this up. We still have so much more to cover, and I'm now realizing this video is going way too long. Kay soon leaves, understanding that he'll be a target. Joi wants to come with him and calls him Joe again. Kay breaks the antenna on the present he gave her earlier, and so he can't be tracked. Love notices this and goes to investigate his house, but by the time she's there, Kay is getting the wooden horse looked at. The radiation on the horse is from a city long gone. I adore this interpretation of an abandoned city because it fits the world of 2049 that is presented, as most people live off-world now, but I also love the fact that it fits the themes of Blade Runner. Instead of facing our problems head-on, this world has fully left them behind. The architecture is complex, but it's not lit up to emphasize its well-being. It being one shade of yellow is fantastic. It's a total contrast to most of the original Blade Runner. Then we get the shot here. This shot is perfect. Kay walking into an empty wasteland is the best summary of the plot ever. This place is huge and empty, then we cut back to love. This back and forth sequence where each plot line directly comes after each other is something I particularly like. This film juggles new plot lines in a way I really appreciate. It's super easy to lose focus and to expand the world more, but this film stays laser focused on the characters. Love walks into Joshi's office, demanding to see Kay. She doesn't know either, so Love crushes Joshi's glass in her hand, which is a fantastic intimidation tactic that adds to Love's threat. Love kills Joshi so she can look into the mainframe. The cinematography of it is fantastic. The window serves as a frame for the scene, but the frame is the cold dark while the picture is the cold brightness. Just like the first murder, the absence of noise adds to the eeriness. Then we jump cut back to Kay with a typical Hans Zimmer cue. Kay walks along the wasteland, crowded with mist and the remnants of statues long ago serving as the only thing that's a different color. The architecture of the city was more important than the people of it, just like LA. Aesthetic being the only thing that mattered here is what killed it. This is another amazing example of visual exposition that helps contextualize why the Earth is being abandoned. Kay's slow walk through it forces us to take in the atmosphere with him. We have to analyze what the hell even is this place. Now for one of the greatest reincorporations I've ever seen in a film. There is a question in the original film, a part of the Void Conf test, that says,
You're watching television. Suddenly you realize there's a wasp crawling on your arm.
I'd kill it.
This question didn't even have a chance to be finished in the original, and yet Rachel responded with something so fast and so heartless. Yet emotional reaction is a part of the test. Now I wonder what Kay does. While Kay may be a replicant, that emotional reaction bit is absolutely a non-factor. Replicants have no emotional difference from humans because everyone is different. It doesn't matter who. This message is something that could have only been delivered through both of these movies. The hint that being a replicant doesn't and shouldn't matter was hinted in the original, but is heavily expanded upon here. Kay then makes it to the casino. This entire sequence does kind of remind me how prodding the original could be, but I love it here because now it purposefully adds suspense when it matters. We know to feel scared because of the insertion of a tripwire, so it's obvious someone resides here. The visuals tell the story. Kay finds a piano and plays a key. The piano in the last movie was structured in a way where its second appearance represented a connection, but here, the piano could represent Kay's lack of direction. The piano's imagery throughout both films is strong, and I've speculated a lot what it means, but at the end of the day, the piano really symbolizes Blade Runner. The piano is an old piece of technology kept for generations and generations. It's one of the few things in Blade Runner that does not have a modern upgrade. It really doesn't need one. The piano is the past's joy, the present's joy, and the future's joy. Anyway, Kay turns to his right and sees a dog, but then from behind him,
He reads.
Deckard returns. It took them an hour and 45 minutes to show Deckard. That takes some huge balls to have your former main character appear this late. Unlike most sequel reboots, the main character is different. Deckard isn't some fan service inclusion to make the audience happy. He appeared because everything led Kay to him. Deckard is the dad of the Memory Maker and possibly Kay. Honestly, Deckard's performance here with context of Kay is all of a sudden a lot more convincing. Instead of the emotionless straight arrow we get in the original, we get a man who sounds like he is lost it all. He doesn't have Rachel anymore, only just a dog and a casino all to himself. This also implies that Deckard turned to gambling, maybe losing so much money that he could never leave. His voice is a lot more grizzled, and just take this quick comparison from 2049 to the original.
I don't work here anymore. Give it to Holden. He's good.
I just have some questions.
What questions?
Anyway, Deckard deduces he's a cop and shoots at Kay, knocking him off the balcony. Now we get a second cat and mouse chase within this franchise. Could Denis Villeneuve live up to the first one? Absolutely! Kay at first takes a back seat to to the chase as it's centered around Deckard. This is fantastic as we're already familiar with Deckard, so following his perspective again is nostalgic while purposeful because now we fear for Kay. We then get a brief shot of Kay. I gotta appreciate the focusing on this shot because it goes between the far distance hunter Deckard and then focuses on the barely visible hiding in the shadows prey Kay. Deckard being center screened and Kay being on the right third while the entire left third is black gets us to focus on the interaction. Denis Villeneuve is super good at isolating the blocking of an actor. Just look at the torture scene from Prisoners. Kay trips the bomb intentionally, or by accident, I don't really know, and we're now back to Kay's perspective, as now we're in unknown territory, so it makes more sense to present that territory in the eyes of someone who has never seen it before. The lights come on, and now we see we're in a party room with roulette tables. With different lighting, we could maybe see how beautiful this set actually is, but the lack of light maintains the suspenseful tone. However, a hologram of Elvis Presley appears center stage, dancing with no audio originally, before the audio turns on and it's glitched heavily. The audio cuts on and off with Elvis Presley switching poses and position constantly. What does Kay do? He sits on the floor and for a brief few seconds revels in the glitched performance in front of him, before Deckard shoots again. This huge contrast between an Elvis Presley performance and the hunting is amazing. It creates this atmosphere that I haven't really seen before. The gunshot signaling the end of the music is a great way to cause auditory whiplash. Deckard emerges from the shadows, gun in hand, now back to his perspective. However, the music isn't playing, it is dead silent. Just take a look at the audio waves. The hologram dancers now give the scene color, and another distorted music cue plays before Kay finally makes his moves, disarming him and throwing him. The sound design is just impact of blows and the heavy breathing. Kay doesn't fight back, only blocking and throwing. The extravagant color of the dancers clashes with bright white LEDs that flash at various positions. Also, the music consistently foreshadows an attack, which is a small detail I like. Also, gotta give credit that the flashing lights aren't prevalent enough to give me a headache. The choreography is also super great. The fight doesn't come off as sloppy, but rather convey its intent of an old man fighting back against an immovable peacekeeper. However, what causes Deckard to stop fighting is the music. Elvis Presley's Can't Help But Falling in Love With You is the song that causes the two to bond. Notice earlier how one thing Deckard appreciated about Kay is that he knew the thing that Deckard was talking about was Treasure Island with the chest line.
I didn't happen to have a piece of cheese about you now. Would you, boy?
Treasure Island?
He reads.
Elvis Presley remains in between the two, serving as the bridge for them to come together. I often find myself bonding with people with the media I enjoy, and I love that that is represented here in this film. They then go and drink whiskey together. It's basically just a scene of small talk, but there are notable moments like Kay asking Deckard if his dog is real, and Deckard responding that he doesn't know, which I think is funny. Also, the bit about the name is brilliant because he first gives out his serial number, and Deckard asks for a real name. Kay reluctantly says Joe. Kay then gets to asking questions. We then learn that Deckard abandoned his children to keep them safe. This is the first thing that I find that Deckard did to be heroic. However, it ended up hurting him in the long run, giving him no purpose. Kay, a few moments later, walks over to the jukebox and plays a Frank Sinatra song with the lyrics Joe, which is nice. However, Kay notices wooden dolls of animals similar to his horse. It's never outright confirmed, but it is implied Deckard is his father, especially from the male and female DNA strands earlier. Before long, the bad guys show up, and we get more shots of the desolate wasteland that is the city. How the upcoming scene is edited is genius. It starts with the ships flying in, and into Kay laying down, followed by beeping. It's a flip-flop moment of a character relaxing to the danger approaching. The music rises when our character finally knows they're screwed. Fast forward and Deckard is taken away. I do like that Kay is able to take out every normal person but is destroyed by love. She then goes up to the Joi's transmitter and breaks it. Kay finally gained things in his life and now they're taken away. His potential dad and his lover now gone. The tracking shot of the dog walking into the scene to show the bad guys also leaving displays a lot of emotions at once. The wreck that is the household and the feeling of abandonment are captured beautifully all in one shot by a character that isn't even Kay. The last Blade Runner video was called Tears in the Rain, being named after the scene where Roy Batty passes away and bestills his memories onto a destined to live forever Deckard. And now Deckard is in risk of death. Deckard hid away from society. It is now finally being brought in for his ability to reproduce replicant children. Just when he was about to be reunited with his only kid, he is taken away to potentially never pass on his memories. Kay is discovered by a group of scavengers, and now we enter the final act. It starts beautifully with absolutely no dialogue. The shots alone tell the story of scavengers rescuing him and bringing him to safety, with those shots being visually stunning. The shots of the cars coming in is fantastic because the light in the scene is what gives the shots color. We can only make out what we can see with the light we do get, and like always, I love these types of shots that emphasize how dark the story is while also being visually coherent. It sets a sinister tone as we now prepare to see a Kay who has nothing left. However, we see the prostitute from earlier along with the people she was with earlier in the city. The scene we're now placed in is set in this abandoned looking facility, something that looks abandoned to today's standard. That droning score combined with the echo in their voices add more to the atmosphere. Kay touches her, contributing to the feeling of verifying reality. Soon, a lady by the name of Frieza, no, not that Frieza, and I'm not going to bother to look up how to say it, so her name's Frieza, arrives and she begins to explain the importance of the replicant child. A replicant being born makes them no different from a human. It's why they're a great concern in this world, as now replicants can't be controlled if they're just the same as humans. This sentiment is explained best by,
"If a baby can come from one of us, we are our own masters."
People from the background emerge and start to crowd the shot. Instead of being alone, Kay has support.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
This phrase describes what must happen to Deckard so no leads get traced back to him. I actually don't like this resolution. Frieza's first option is to kill Deckard. There's a hint of destructiveness in it, and Kay doesn't go through with this plan. There are other ways to solve this, and Kay wants to see his father once more.
Deckard only wanted his baby to be safe. And she is. When the time comes, I will show her to the world, and she will lead our army.
Kay looks aggressive for the first time in the film. Ryan Gosling's expressions are filled with a silent rage. He sits down with the background blooming, with us only able to see their silhouettes. The sound design and backdrop give the audience this uneasy feeling, as once during a vulnerable time, we can't see our characters. We're just as vulnerable as Kay is. Kay is being told everything he thought he experienced in this movie was a lie. None of it meant anything. The presentation of the scene, going back to previous other scenes while repeating certain lines, is genius as it shows Kay rethinking the events just like we are. We soon know how this happened with the repeat of the line,
There's a bit of every artist in their work.
Kay is just a lonely replicant once more. The memory maker made his memories an inspiration of her own experiences. Some may wonder what the point of this movie is, having a character explore their own past and have it deconfirmed as a plot point. Before we can get an answer, we cut to an interaction between Deckard and Wallace. Wallace first points out a random fish that is jumping in this amazing set that has the familiar aspects to Deckard, but the futuristic architecture for Wallace. The color yellow in this scene represents fear. It's why it's been a strong presence in this final act. The line,
"All the courage in the world cannot alter fact,"
is very reminiscent of Kay's story. Wallace still speaks ominously, asking calmly to see the child. He talks a big game and does things like playing old audio files and constructing a Rachel clone in attempts to manipulate Deckard. When Rachel appears, Wallace goes into how she looked and how the whole plan was to get him to fall in love with her, which is a retcon I like. If we're going with the idea that Deckard was a new model replicant, then it makes sense as to why he'd meet another new/newer model. Their love feeling programmed actually makes the romance of the last film more believable. This film doesn't just expand the original, but in my opinion actively makes it better. The shot composition here is great. Deckard is always a very normal person, but Wallace is a weirdo, appearing in and out of the shadows, rarely maintaining eye contact. How Deckard and Wallace become darker in a way to emphasize who's in control is a subtle touch that doesn't make the scene too unrealistic, especially with how much it changes in position.
You don't have children, do you?
Well, I have millions.
Deckard saying you don't have children to Wallace, only for Wallace to lean his head in to clarify that he has millions with the explosion of the score, is a sinister touch that I love. There's a lot to analyze about this scene, such as the small explanation of the name Joi with the line,
Pain reminds you the joy you felt was real. More joy then.
perfection. Rachel walks into the screen from out of nowhere, and the shot composition from reaction shots that correctly reverse each other into longer distance shots that maintain reversing as well is great. It puts emphasis on the characters while still not forgetting about the background. Deckard rejects Rachel, knowing that she is not real, just a creation of Wallace meant to manipulate him. People shouldn't be born this way. This highlights the clearest difference between Tyrell and Wallace. Tyrell created replicants out of a god complex, meaning he still cared about them as if they were people who could be different and stronger. Wallace demonstrated how much greed is in his heart by executing the Rachel clone. The invalidation of existence is something Rachel never considered. This scene is amazing and fully completes Deckard's story. It's an amazing verbal exchange between Harrison Ford and Jared Leto, who are both at the top of their game with how subtle their expressions and line delivery can get. Like always, every frame here is beautiful. However, it's not the best scene in the movie. It is time for me to talk about what I consider possibly one of the greatest scenes ever put to film. Classic storytelling has often followed the most important person in the narrative. We followed Kay for this entire time just to find out that he is nothing. Kay thought he is somebody important and somebody destined for great things. Before I talk about the scene, I want to put you in his shoes. What would you do if you found out your life meant nothing? That you were deceived by your own creativity? We as humans collectively want to feel important. We want to achieve great things. Think about how complacent the replicants must feel knowing their existence was purely for labor. Kay broke out of that complacency and found nothing. I think the majority of people here would give up. Even in the moment I saw this reveal and thought, what was the point of it? So much so that I even collectively blocked that scene from my memory until I started to write this. I felt so much for Kay that I chose to believe he was human despite this. That previous reveal is so mind-bogglingly negative and hurtful that my mind tried to look past it, and I missed the point of this film. Kay splits off from the group and roams the empty, rainy city, lost and confused before a familiar friend showed back up. It was Joi, now bigger and shot in a way that isolates the background. Blade Runner has always been about environmental storytelling, and Joi is not a person. She's so convincing as a person that we raise what she is to some importance. She is just a part of the environment, and here is where I realized how people fall for this type of thing. The artificial forces of these thirst spots is something that comforts us. It puts us in an environment of comfort where we forget about everything else. Her first line is, after all,
Hello, handsome.
Now, let's reset back to the beginning of this scene. Like we've seen many times before, the rain serves as the ambiance and really puts us in an isolated mood. Kay's back is immediately the first thing we see, his emotions and face hidden to us at first before that hello handsome line is said. That first shot we see of Joi is with Kay's back turned to us like our first shot of the scene. We immediately understand how powerless Kay is just through the shot composition and the color composition, because notice how bright and colorful Joi is and how dark Kay is. When we get to that far back shot, Kay is barely there. He's overtaken by this figure of greed and affection. The consumer is small and powerless. Kay just looks up with a cold, dead face, listening, but he never gives in. Notice how all of Joi's lines are purposefully seductive.
Hello, handsome. What a day. You look lonely. I can fix that.
The first one compliments his looks, the second one tries to relate, and the third one tried to make a promise. All of the lines are indicative of what the Joi Bot is.
You look like a good show.
This final line from Joi to me is downright demoralizing. Kay wasn't even considered special by the AI. Every person gets the name Joe. Nothing about the original experience with the Joi Bot meant anything. It was all programming. Is Kay important to anybody? The huge Joi hologram steps back and we see the advertisement for Joi and now see her for the product she really is. Before I talk about what happens next, allow me to go back and analyze the shot composition because it tells a story on its own. Remember when I pointed out that the advertisements are the only thing that give this broken city light? Notice how it's nearly pitch black and then all of a sudden Joi appears and the scene is lit in bright pinks and purples. The blood on Kay's face also serves to give even more texture to this very unconventional lighting. Every time Kay is shown from behind, we only see a silhouette, which contrasts heavily with the Joi Bot, who is obviously a huge focus. Then there's the shot here. This shot has Joi take up the left side of the screen, with her hand taking up the middle. This shot perfectly shows us the bridge that exists between corporation and individuality. The three focal points of the shot also get gradually bigger from right to left, which once again puts Joi on that higher power. Ryan Gosling's performance here needs to be commemorated. Notice how the silhouette shots all look very similar, with the only difference being Kay's head position. Due to the fact Ryan Gosling only moves his head, we can directly see how empty he is without having to say it. You can read nearly everything Kay is feeling and thinking from pure blankness of his expressions. He's a hollow person, not even able to call himself human anymore. This scene by itself illustrates Kay's feelings. This kind of visual and personal style storytelling is something I fucking love with all of my heart. Outside of the depiction of tragedies like maybe a Schindler's List, I have never seen a more downright nihilistic scene, especially one that has the subtlety of the Good Joe scene. After the Joi Bot disappears, Kay looks down perfectly in time with the intense drumming in the background, and then the next shot is of his gun. What would you do if you were Kay? Be honest here. People commit suicide because they see no future worth living. What's the point of Kay going on? Any meaningful connection he's made isn't here anymore.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
He's not human, so why should he care?
Because you've never seen a miracle.
This is true, however. Kay has never seen a miracle happen. However, his choice here is the miracle. Instead of ending his life, Kay decides that he's going to save Deckard despite everything. Why does he save Deckard? Not for any complex reason, but rather to reunite him with his child. Do what he wanted, but for someone else. Despite everything that happened in this story, Kay still does the right thing, even when it's so small. His actions really don't mean anything for the wider scale of the world. Kay, on paper, doesn't matter, but the fact that he still did this amazing act of reuniting a child and parent is genuinely one of the most beautiful concepts ever. Kay may not be born human, but that doesn't matter. The power of human perseverance resides in him like the rest of us. He is not an emotionless husk. Kay is an introverted, selfless hero. This is what we as humans should strive to be. Do nice things when nothing feels like it matters. Push through the pain
just for that satisfaction of bringing other people happiness. This is what this story means. It's all about doing the right thing, even when things in your own life don't feel right. To me, that is such a powerful message to convey in a film. And despite what science tells us in this universe, Kay is as human as the rest of us. I'm not going to talk about how Kay saves Deckard because it's unnecessary. Of course, the set design and music is amazing in these scenes, but they don't need to be described in detail. I'm going to cut to Kay's potential final moments. Deckard goes to meet his daughter, and as he does that, Kay sits on the steps. The snow doesn't make any noise. There's no ambiance in this scene. It's just quietness shown when Kay is at peace. Heartbreakingly, Tears in Rain starts to play. The one time a song is reused, and it serves the same purpose. However, the context given to it is a whole lot more wholesome. Instead of a man passing on his knowledge to keep his experiences alive, we see a man finally getting his big break. No noise of the city or the rain, just snow. Not rain, snow. Think about how snow preserves people in time, while the rain hides the tears in the first Blade Runner. Kay's impact upon Deckard and his daughter is a reunion. Batty's impact on Deckard was a way to preserve memories, while Kay was a way to make new memories. And to me, this is amazing writing. These two movies end in similar ways, but have entirely different purposes. If you think Kay dying is a sad end, then let me show you this shot. He's smiling. It's the first and only positive emotion in his life, and it was done by helping people. Kay, to me, is one of those characters that is the embodiment of everything good in humanity. He's someone who gives himself up so he can allow other people to thrive. He's someone who moves past all the bad things to do good. You may notice a theme behind all the stories I've covered in this channel, and that is that I love stories about good men. People who, beyond the surface of appearance, are kind, caring, and never stop moving. That moment when Kay lays down and just stays there is so rewarding to me. That shot looking down on him is so beautiful, as without dialogue, we get exactly how he's feeling. Kay did it. Kay did something good in a world filled with bad, which has really never happened in this world. He made someone's life better. The movie officially ends with Deckard's hand on the glass with a slight smile forming on his face. This is one of my favorite films ever made. I love the first Blade Runner, but there are parts of it that are flawed. 2049 has every single good thing about the original and more. This is what a sequel should do. Expand on the original while still having the qualities that people loved. It's a shame that this film didn't do well at the box office, but here's why I don't harp on that. Go on the internet and see all the 2049 related content and memes, and you'll find that this movie did not die, and in fact is still alive, and judging by the length of this video, it's easy to see that this film has so much depth to it. Each and every scene offers so much insight into the world and its writing that I couldn't leave many scenes out of it. I know to an extent I'm robbing this film for people of its mystique, but I needed to talk about how this film's presentation, acting, editing, cinematography, and music were all so good. This is the film we should point to when we think about what big budget blockbusters should be. To say it once more, if I haven't already, this is the most expensive art house film ever made by people who love the original. I love it so much. With that, I end talking about this movie. This video was easily my biggest project yet, and arguably, this was the reason all my other videos were made, so I could prepare for this one. I appreciate you all for either just checking out this video, or the ones who've seen every video I've produced. I will see you all later.